Once upon a time, not so distant, the United Kingdom was in turmoil. The recently elected government had become very unpopular. They had swept to power, offering the fastest growth in the advanced world, but were mired in stagnation. They'd promised an end to price rises, only to see inflation near double. They had told people they could deliver better public services without putting their taxes up. Instead, they'd given everyone a shock with their first budget heaping more taxes on a hard-pressed people. They promised that budget would be one and done. Then they put through a second budget with even more bad news, soaking the not-so-rich. Seeing their slump in popularity, the ruling party agreed to hold a contest to see who should be the true leader to sort out the mess they had created. Wanting to appear closer to our historical traditions, they looked to see how King Arthur had emerged as a popular and successful leader all those years ago. They decided on a modern version of the sword in the stone. The one who could pull the sword of growth from the anvil of a stagnant economy would be chosen to lead the country to faster growth. What could go wrong? They were needed to rescue the struggling Labour knights squabbling around the cabinet table. They adapted the Arthurian words, and so they said, "Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil by entering the growth code is the rightful leader of the United Kingdom." They tried to make their inscribed stone look different to Ed Miliband's 2015 showstopper. There was a digital lock on the anvil. Oh, that was so up to date. Only a leader who was good with a smartphone and social media would triumph in this radically modernized version of how the UK should choose its Prime Minister. They called the country the UK, not England. They recognised that their policy towards the EU and the Republic of Ireland was going to end in Northern Ireland not being under UK rule, but they wished to hold on to Wales and Scotland, where the nationalist parties were such a threat. They saw no contradiction in looking back to the popular English legends, whilst themselves wanting to break up England into the very unloved regions the EU had always wanted. They fell to arguing over whether the code to unlock the sword should require the candidates to reveal a digital ID. They asked if they should have a double or triple lock on the device with an enabling code to be sent to the smartphone of the candidate for release. They were concerned that this most important task could be disrupted by a cyber attack from a foreign power. So they decided to leave it to the candidates to guess what the system was, to make it a more difficult competition to win. Arthur, they read, had risen to greatness with the help of his special advisor, Merlin. Merlin, ably assisted by Archimedes the owl, had trained Arthur for great things. He had turned him into a fish to see the world from a different perspective. He'd helped him to do the washing up, creating chaos in the kitchen. He had assisted him in fighting off the wicked witch, Madam Mim. So who was to be the special advisor who could help a new hero triumph? And how could they defeat the wicked sorcerer, Nigel? Who had the magic power to trigger growth in a seemingly moribund economy? Was Archimedes the owl now to be displaced by artificial intelligence? Was Merlin someone they knew? Oh, and what if Merlin were a conservative after all, with conservative ideas? Well, they decided not to go there, as it was too awful to think about. They realized the new Arthur's education had to be updated. They couldn't possibly let Merlin turn candidates temporarily into fish. After all, they'd just given most of our fish away to the French to kill. Worse still, their failure to ban the murderous European super trawlers meant they wouldn't stand a chance of survival if they met one of those during their time in the Channel. They also wanted to avoid all those illegal boats they hadn't stopped. There was no shortage of challengers for the task of taking over the huge government they were building up. Angela strode forward. She, some time ago, had won the title of Deputy Prime Minister and fancied her chances. She took up the growth challenge by saying she would build 1.5 million new homes, which would trigger so many jobs. It would delight so many people who could buy or rent a better property. She wielded her not inconsiderable sword to show she would know how to use the true sword of growth. She tried to scythe through layers of planners, quangos, and local government bureaucracy to gain the right to build all those homes. Unfortunately, the rest of the government was making it ever dearer to build a home through more extensive regulation. It was putting people off being landlords through rules and taxes that were too penal. It had lost the confidence of the markets, who put up longer-term interest rates affecting mortgages. Instead of Angela's rich vocabulary creating a surge of new homes being built, the builders said it was too dear to build and that they lacked customers. Housing output tumbled, and the target of 1.5 million homes looked impossible to hit. Angela then fell down over her own housing. She failed to pay a tax she insisted on for others. Rachel said there was no need to have a contest for leader, as she was going to ensure by her help that the current Prime Minister did deliver the growth he had promised. Rachel thought all she had to do was to increase public spending a lot. That should, after all, create more jobs and provide more public facilities. The Treasury warned her that she could not just do that by borrowing more, so she was talked into more and more ideas to take more money in tax to pay for her public projects. As the public sector was less productive than the private sector, this meant taking money away from companies and people who could generate the growth and giving it to a government that did not know how to. Governments had tried spending to grow with the very expensive HS2 railway. That turned into a cash sink, with half the projected line cancelled and the other half so delayed it was no use to anyone. The previous government had managed to improve half a rail line from Oxford to Cambridge, but the unions refused to operate the trains in a dispute over manning. Rachel became even more unpopular than the Prime Minister she was trying to help, and took more and more criticism for things going so wrong. Rachel proved you could not tax your way to higher growth. Ed was the most popular of the contenders with Labour voters. He knew the answer to growth. It was all a matter of colour. Green was for go and for success. He said he knew how to spend both more public money and more private investment to replace all our electricity generation with wind and solar farms. When asked what we did when there was no sun or wind, he conceded we might need a bit of gas back up for a bit. That would need carbon capture and storage, another very expensive item that brought no direct benefit to customers and taxpayers who had to pay for it. Ed busied himself with closing down our oil and gas industry at home, with supervising the collapse of our petrochemical industry, and closing our blast furnaces that made steel, all in the name of green growth and less carbon dioxide. It was difficult to see how any of that helped our growth, and it was unpopular with all those losing their jobs. He did get some solar and wind projects up and running, but unfortunately, so many of the jobs they created were in China, as the UK wasn't very good at making all the things you need for renewable power. Ed had been the leader in the past, so he thought he could use the Arthurian strapline of the once and future king. This brought back bad memories for some. Would he go for another promise pledged on a big block of limestone? That hadn't worked too well. David thought he had the code to the sword. Being one of the brighter cabinet members, in his new job in charge of prisons, he had worked out that if he let more prisoners out early, it would cut the number of embarrassments from officials mistakenly letting them out too soon. More importantly, he had seen how enterprising so many of the prisoners were, running successful illegal drugs and contraband businesses whilst in jail. Why not let them out earlier to use these skills to grow the economy? Rachel from accounts could doubtless get their efforts into the growth numbers, one of the many adjustments to official statistics that they were making in order for things to look better. As deputy to the PM, David thought he was on a bit of an inside track. After all, he'd helped the Prime Minister with his main growth policy of giving more powers over us to the European Union and giving plenty of money to foreign governments, along with the odd island. Surely the PM was right, that if we gave lots away to foreigners, they would like us more, and that must be good for growth. Andy saw himself as the Wart or young Arthur of the contest. Not one of those sitting round the table with the Prime Minister. He pitched for the job from Manchester. He told everyone he'd crack the growth problem for his city by getting access to more of that tax Rachel had thoughtfully snatched from the public. Some unkindly pointed to the private construction of lots of expensive flats that did not all have residents or buyers. He glossed over these tiresome details. He would repackage what Rachel was trying to do, but just say he would do more of it. He needed to find a place that would elect him as a member of parliament if he was to stand any chance of being leader. He was coy about that bit, as any constituency might take exception to being told to swap MPs when there was no need to. Wes was the super champ of the TV studios. He saw off the Prime Minister's attempt to dismiss his ambitions to take over. He converted the Prime Minister's attack into a chance to show just how much better he was at doing it. He got much of the extra tax money that had been raised to be given to the NHS, which he was trying to run. He spent a lot of it on sacking top managers who he thought were getting in the way of spending the money more wisely. That did not help with all the unions who had votes. His trouble was the Labour Party did not take so kindly to some of his more market-oriented approaches to growth and success. There are also plenty of runners and riders to be the new Merlin. Max Sweeney had a reputation for wizardry. He had helped the current Prime Minister win the election that had eluded them for 14 long years. McSweeney had swept aside Sue Gray, the civil servant turned advisor who had helped them prepare for government. As the Prime Minister slumped in the polls, some blamed the advisor. Torsten Bell was thought to be wizard with numbers. He wanted to tax the pensioners more by putting up income tax, but let people on moderate wages off by cutting national insurance. Rachel and her friends allowed this to be tested out, only to discover people did not like it and saw it as a big break with the government's promises. The true Merlin has not yet revealed himself or herself. What we do know is what the true Merlin should be saying. They will be telling the new Arthur that the UK is overtaxed, with too many talented people and companies leaving. They will be saying government spending is out of control and more people need to work rather than be on benefits. They will explain to their pupil that government has made itself very unpopular by failing to control the borders, by interfering to close down businesses, by driving up energy prices and imposing bans on fossil fuels and lots of new cars. Merlin clearly does not work for any of the runners and riders we've seen so far. So the sword of growth is stuck fast in the stone anvil. Only a new Arthur who can provide the magic formula for growth can unlock that digital lock which controls it all. I doubt any of the challengers above can do this. The UK is desperate for a new Arthur who loves our country and knows how to unleash its energies for growth. May that Arthur arise. In the meantime, let's all have a Merry Christmas.